But first, let's just recap the tragic story that sparked this debate.
What would you say to those parents who still refuse to vaccinate their children?
You're not only putting your child at risk, you're putting every child out there at risk.
This is Dana.
Dana who?
Dana Elizabeth McCaffrey.
Oh, she's beautiful.
One minute she's this beautiful little girl. And then, you know, she looked like someone had strangled her.
Dana McCaffrey's life was too short. She was born perfectly healthy, but at 4 weeks old, Dana caught whooping cough.
It is really difficult to watch any baby go through that. I think the risk-benefit for vaccination is firmly established. The benefit far outweighs the risk.
We have a medical community that's saying if you get measles, if you get whooping cough, you're going to die from it. Well, where is the information from that?
It's just not right. It's just not right that my little girl is in a grave. I didn't want to be the vaccination crusader, you know.
Or is it our responsibility? It's a responsibility of governments, and they need to take charge.
I just want my girl.
Yeah, the McCaffrey family is with us tonight, and we'll come to them shortly. We're also joined by Professor Peter McIntyre from the National Immunisation and Surveillance Centre and anti-vaccine GP Dr Giselle Cook. Dr Cook, you object to me calling you an anti-vaccine GP?
Absolutely. That's in no way an accurate representation of what my advice is to my patients.
Despite not having given a vaccination for
my
18 years.
That I'm pro-choice.
But you haven't given a vaccination for 18 years.
That's my personal choice in my practice because I do not provide risky medical interventions to my patients, and I consider vaccination as one of those.
Do you think it's anti-vaccine, Professor?
Well, I think it's Russian roulette, really, because, sure, the number of children these days with good medical care who actually tragically die from these diseases, largely because vaccination has diminished them so much, is very small, but you don't know whether your child will be one of those unlucky ones. There's nothing in terms of fantastic diet, great lifestyle that's going to protect them. Only vaccination will protect them, and sure, there may be no problem, but it's Russian roulette as to whether your child's the one that dies or not.
The medical profession always talks about risks.
Exactly.
What are the risks? That's what parents really... That's why we're here today, because parents aren't sure about these risks.
Well, one of the real dilemmas, I suppose, for vaccination is that it's been a victim of its own success. So vaccines have been so successful at turning diseases that people were really fearful of, like polio in the 1950s, into things which are in the history books, that we're not reminded about why it's so important. And we see people who come to our country as refugees or immigrants from countries that aren't as lucky as our own. They can't wait to get vaccinated because they realise the value of it from what they've seen in their own country. But we don't see that because things are going so well.
Ms. Dory, you want to say something, obviously?
In 1970, when the measles vaccine was introduced in Australia, there were 3 deaths in the country from measles. Right now, the government says there are 12 deaths a year. So I don't see that there's been any benefit from the measles vaccine.
You also did say that you were going to bring along a case of autism and also another case of a child suffering fit disorders. Neither of those cases eventuated, Ms. Dory.
Well, actually, I gave those numbers to Gabrielle, but she has not contacted the parents, one of them in Melbourne and another one in Sydney.
No, she has contacted them, and they didn't want to speak out. And I think this is one of the problems from your network, that you often do say that there are these cases, but they never really eventuate.
Well, we've reported all of our reactions to the government. Since 2002, we were entitled to.
And yet the government says keep vaccinating.
Well, the government says keep vaccinating, but we're looking at the government's own information.
Well, there's a couple of inaccuracies about what Meryl's just said. So, firstly, it's completely untrue that there are deaths from measles. There hasn't been a death from measles in over 20 years, and yet if we look back in the 1950s, before measles vaccination, there were 20 or 30 deaths a year. So I'm not sure where Meryl's getting her information from. But there have been no deaths from measles in Australia for a long time. In fact, one of the reasons there was a kind of tail of deaths was there's this very nasty thing called SSPE, which is basically brain damage you get from measles that happens about 20 years after you get measles. You don't get that from the vaccine. You do get it from measles, and so there will still be deaths recorded as measles 20 years later. But actual deaths from measles itself, no.
We have twins in the studio. This is Levi.
Yeah.
And Lakem, his twin brother, has just left us.
Oh, no, sorry. No, Lakem.
This is Lakem. This is Lakem. Now, Lakem has not been immunised at all.
No.
Just behind Lakem, we have a mother with a 15-week-old who is just recovering from whooping cough, who has been vaccinated. Let me ask you, if I may, Benjamin's mother, do you worry that you're now in a studio 2 seats away from a little boy that hasn't been vaccinated?
I do. Because after seeing what he went through with whooping cough and how awful it is, it does worry me. I worry about him going to childcare centres and then back to school, worrying what he can catch from children who haven't been vaccinated. And I don't mean any offence against this mother, that's her choice, and against her beautiful boy, but it's my first gut reaction is to think I don't want him near them.
And Lakem's mum, would you reply, please?
I don't think I know enough to comment. I mean, I've researched as much as I've been able to after having them, and I've decided not to. But I think it's...
But not knowing enough. Is that good enough?
No, well, I think it's personal choice, and I think fair enough, that's great. But personally, I've chosen not to.
I just want to go quickly, if I may, to Tony and David McCaffrey. Now, they weren't very comfortable about coming here tonight because after our story last week, they were inundated with hate mail from those who don't believe in vaccination. A number of the people, Ms. Dorey, were from your network. And after having lost your 4-week-old daughter, Dana, what sort of things were said to you?
Oh, look, it's ranged, all sorts of things. People saying, how can you force people to put chicken blood into their child, to being sent to the AVN's newsletter, to...
A 91-year-old grandmother claiming that it's wrong, that she witnessed such terrible things 50 years ago.
That by speaking out we're going to kill more children.
I am very sorry if anyone sent you anything that was hurtful in any way. I did receive an awful lot of emails from our members who said that they feel terrible about Dana's death, I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong, and that it was a tragedy. But why is it that a child who dies from a disease becomes front page news when the children who die from vaccines are invisible and discounted? All children are important.
But there is no, believe me, if there was an ounce of proof of children dying from vaccines, I'm sure Professor and Dr. Cook would know that.
I sent your studio about 30 mainstream medical journal reports.
And yet you couldn't bring one case here today.
Obviously, children get ill, children die, and it's very tragic whenever that happens. And it's often particularly something like autism, where we really don't know what causes it. It's always very tempting to look for any cause, and vaccines is an easy target. But all I can say is that when these things have been looked at scientifically, and the risk of something happening with a vaccine versus without a vaccine has been compared, there's never been any scientific proof that there's a difference.
And your medical qualifications are?
My medical qualifications are that I have studied this issue for 20 years, and I have asked for a live debate. I am not a doctor, but I have a brain, and I don't think you need an MD to have a brain.
Fair enough. This young lady here?
I have an 8.5-month-old daughter, and I couldn't put her in childcare if she wasn't vaccinated. And looking at... Hang on, can I just finish? Can I just finish what I'm about to say? If you're looking at this from a child protection point of view, I actually work in welfare. We're putting a child can be reported for neglect if their health is at risk, if they're not clothed, if they're not fed properly. We're putting our kids at risk by not vaccinating them.
I'm a mother of 3, and my decision came out because I had done no reading, as most people don't, on vaccination, and I was given a consent form for hepatitis B for my baby about to be born, and I said, why is hepatitis B being given to newborns? I didn't get a hepatitis B injection until I went hiking in Irian Jaya, so I was a bit confused, and I said, I need time to think about it. So I just didn't do the first one, and then I started reading, and I found out that, you know what, parents don't know that there are risks, yes, of catching the disease, but there are also risks of getting vaccinated, and there's serious adverse reactions. Whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, you can still carry and transmit the disease. Am I correct?
No.
No,
Yes.
Professor, you're saying no?
No, I'm saying, I mean, on the one hand, there is no vaccine that's 100% effective and 100% safe.
That's the point. That's the point. As an Australian parent, we need to know that they're not 100% safe. And I'm not going to blindly walk into my GP and say, you know what, stick whatever you want in his arm, because I need to know that there are, before I can make an informed decision, I need to know what are the risks of the diseases and what are the risks of the vaccines, and I make a choice as that person's parent what I think is best for my child. And I respect anyone who's done all the research and they feel that the best thing for their child is to vaccinate. I totally respect that. The problem is parents aren't researching it. The information isn't out there.
But the information
It's
is there,
not.
and the
It's
trouble is
not.
that a lot of the information that parents see is the sort of information that Merrill's group is providing, and it's totally biased.
Please.
What the professor said about bias, what I'd like to know is how much money do you make from the government, from the general practice immunisation incentive scheme? How much money do you get per child who's vaccinated on time from the government?
None. Oh. Me personally, but clearly, general practitioners do receive some funding from the government for giving vaccinations. But that's simply part of the cost that they incur in running their practices.
Doesn't that make you a vested interest then? So are doctors really vaccinating because they believe in it, or are they being vaccinated because they're being bribed to?
I personally find it so insulting to be paid an incentive payment to deliver any sort of medical care. You'd have to be suspicious of the motives, or someone would have to pay a doctor. And there is evidence now that doctors are discriminating against patients who are unvaccinated and withdrawing help and medical assistance to those who are unvaccinated. I have received no financial incentive in my practice and will never.
Can I just go to the McCaffreys? Yeah, Tony, you want to say something?
I'd just like to say that I respect everyone's opinion, and I also do respect that parents have a choice. And I think that the range of opinions being expressed here is why the government needs to do a proper education campaign. The government needs to educate parents of both sides. They need to properly educate people. After I saw what my daughter, she had the most agonising death. And I would do everything in my power to protect her.
Okay. And both sides... We have agreement there from both sides of this argument here, which is beautifully spoken. Thank you. If I can just close it down there. Thanks very much all for joining us in this debate tonight. We do sincerely hope that we've given parents out there a lot more information to deal with this.